The most bullish billionaire in Bitcoin just revealed that he's been talking to major sovereign wealth funds and that they want to tap into a new $100+ trillion market. And it's interesting because of the products that Saylor and MSTR have been releasing have already been tapping into multiple 100 trillion+ markets. And this is now the third one that he has yet to talk about before. And it makes it very interesting, the timing and who he could be potentially talking to with all of this, because there's trillion-dollar sovereign wealth funds in the building with Michael Saylor when he's telling this. So let's dive in. But first, let's listen in to Michael Saylor, the Giga Chad himself.
Yeah. The biggest idea, instead of getting 10% of $2 trillion, why don't you look at the traditional credit market, which is $200 trillion? Look at bank credit in Japan that gives nothing. Look at credit in Europe, gives nothing. Look at Swiss credit, gives nothing. Look at the money markets in the euro that pay 150 basis points, or the money markets in the US that pay 400 basis points.
So he's talking about going after the $200 trillion credit market, which I think is absolutely genius from his perspective, because he's telling all of these guys, hey, I'm lining out the full playbook for you. There's going to be multiple $100 trillion markets that we can tap into by creating financial-based products to leave the old system and go FOMO into the new system, which is Bitcoin, of course. And so all of these guys, we're seeing them get lined up, and how they're talking about potentially sovereign wealth funds talking about buying more Bitcoin. So we had Michael Saylor spotted with some members of the Middle East. And let's not forget, we also had not too long ago Larry Fink talk about sovereign wealth funds are thinking about buying Bitcoin for the long term, and that he's talking about it. They're buying at 120, they're buying at 140, or they're buying at 100, they're buying at 80, and they're looking at it as a long-term investment. So it's not just Michael Saylor being bullish, it's also BlackRock and Larry Fink. And who is buying the ETFs? Well, it is the big money players. Because retail, although they are buying the iBet ETF, their big target audience that BlackRock wants are the people that have the T's behind the names, or the trillions worth of dollars. And the sovereign wealth funds are definitely that. And so what did we see from Michael Saylor as well? We've seen that he's met with the Middle East sovereign wealth funds to pitch Bitcoin-backed credit. And of all people to pitch this, of course, Michael Saylor, the Giga Chad himself, he is attuned to be able to pitch this, but it's interesting on what other markets he's been tapping into. I mean, if you guys have been coming to this channel, you know that I've been covering that he's been tapping into the $300 trillion bond market and the $145 trillion fixed income market already. And so he is now extending this to not only the 500 or the 450+ trillion dollar markets. He's adding another $200 trillion market that Bitcoin could potentially tap into, bringing this to $650 trillion worth of market. Now, Bitcoin is just a $2 to $2.5 trillion asset right now as it stands. So even if it gets 10% or 1% of all of this, that's another $6.5 trillion towards Bitcoin's market cap. And that's, like I said, only 1%. And that would be over, or almost a 3x of what Bitcoin's at right now. So simply a 1% allocation to all of this would make a $250,000, $240,000 Bitcoin here very quickly, maybe even higher. And so while we're watching the development of these markets and how Michael Saylor is going to be utilizing these products, I think it's interesting to keep a very close eye on the development of the MSCI ruling with MSTR because of what we have seen, right? MSTR is essentially using all these financial-based products to tap in to those markets, right? Strategies pump, accelerating the flow of Bitcoin to take away that fixed income market and that bond market, right? We're waiting on some of these, on some of this real estate market, but we do have the $100 trillion money market, right? So Saylor is like tapping into that 300 trillion in fixed income, and he just wants 1% of that, right? That would be double. He called it the speculative attack, right? And this would attack the 10-year US Treasury bills and other bonds. And Saylor expects to grow that at 50% plus per year in the near term, right? So, I mean, watching these flows of capital start to go to strategy, I think it's going to be very interesting and something to watch very closely because, of course, we have all of these financial-based products, yet these products, right, they haven't seen quite the inflows that people would initially think, right? I mean, if you look at Strike, Strive, Stride, all of these ones, they're floating just under $100, which means the demand hasn't been where it needs to be just yet. Although they've been 4 out of the top 10 most successful IPOs in history belong to MSTR. And, you know, let's just be honest here. That is a signal in itself. And all of these other treasury companies starting to follow along in MSTR's footsteps, strategy's footsteps. We going from 64 to nearly 210 in a year since Donald Trump has been elected. This is all a very, let's call it positive sign because everybody's seeing that strategy has been winning. Yet, the reality of all of this is that Saylor has always been early. And so he's going to have some detractors. He's going to have some bumps in the road with all of this as he's trying to tap into these markets. But revealing that these sovereign wealth funds are interested in talking to him, well, this is where we have to listen in because this isn't just, you know, these small guys tapping in. These sovereign wealth funds have trillions of dollars. We have Norway, who is a huge holder in MSTR, their pension fund. We've got the UAE, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia, probably all at Bitcoin Mina right now, sitting with Michael Saylor. And, oh, look at who's over here, Qatar as well. You know, so all of these guys are sitting with Michael Saylor and discussing how he's been tapping in to all of these markets, right? They've created the suite of securities designed to appeal to different segments of the fixed income world, right? Strike, the first one to launch, targeting the 250 million, but upsized to 450 million or 484 million, excuse me. It appeals to investors wanting both income and equity upside, right? Strive pays 10% annual fixed dividend with no equity conversions. So look at that one. And then Strike uses that IPO. So all of these things, they're looking at the 21-21 method, right? He tweeted this out in October of last year, where they wanted to raise $42 billion by selling 21 billion of equity and 21 billion of fixed income by 2027. And they've executed aggressively. They already sold all of that by 2025. And, you know, this is actually a little less. 640 billion or 640,000. We've got MSTR over 660,000 following the buys today. So, I mean, strategy is starting to tap into all of these different markets as I'm lining out. And not only is strategy tapping into all of these markets, everybody's keeping a very close eye, right? All of these people are deeply watching what MicroStrategy is doing and Saylor, because not only now is Bitcoin gone somewhat mainstream, these other players are trying to emulate what Saylor is doing, right? And I mean, if you guys have been following this channel, please hit that subscribe button for me. I know like 70% of you guys are not, but I would love it if you join me in the chat because I've been covering how JP Morgan and their structured notes have essentially tried to tap into MicroStrategy's market. And because they're trying to tap in and just get a little bit of this, They've been having this speculative attack on all of it. But what I think is the most interesting part of all of this is that strategy keeps on trucking along. They keep on buying more and more Bitcoin every single week. And Saylor is out there trying to orange pill all of these different countries. Now, if you follow Saylor, where he's traveled, literally every single country that he's gone to, the central bank, the presidents, all of these places have said something very positive and bullish of Bitcoin. You know, one of them, Brazil, was talking about building a Bitcoin strategic reserve. Saylor was spotted traveling on down to there. He's in Mina right now. He's been in, in Portugal and in other places where they've created these circular economies. So I think Michael Saylor, he knows how to speak to all of these people with high up positions of power. It's including the Trumps. He's been pictured with Eric Trump at Mar-a-Lago. He's been on the Trump executive board talking about all of the different aspects of things that he needs to, build with this Bitcoin strategic reserve. So I just truly believe that Michael Saylor, he's trying to do Satoshi's work over here and bring more people to Bitcoin. And in order to do that, right, he is utilizing all of these different markets, like the fixed income market, and he hasn't gotten to the real estate market yet. And I'm curious to see if he'll actually do that. But he's already using the $115 trillion equities market. But the MSCI ruling, that's where something that we need to watch here very closely. Now, I'm going to get into all of that. But with what we see here, we don't want to be selling Bitcoin, especially when we're tapping around 90,000, right? Because you never know. This could be the last time we see Bitcoin at 90,000. Maybe we see it run up. Maybe we see it go down. Either way, if you want to unlock some liquidity, the safest place to do that is Salt, because they've got the Shield product, their no liquidation solution. They've also got the best rates starting at 9.95%, and they offer 3 different durations, 1, 3, or 5 years. So you can borrow up to 70% LTV with no prepayment fees. So you can unlock some of your liquidity, and you could do it outside the banking system, guys. I mean, we all know these banks. They're not your friends, man. I mean, if you look at some of what our forefathers in the U.S. have said about banks, I mean, leave some of your favorites in the comments. I would love to hear some of you guys' favorites here, either in the chat or the comments, because man, oh man, it's every time I go back and look, it gets extra juicy. But the thing that I think is interesting, right, is we've seen the ETF in assets under management, right? We saw this recent sell-off here right before the price started to dip coincidentally. Makes you think. But this sell-off here just outlines just how early we are when it comes to the overall Bitcoin adoption curve, right? Because these ETFs, right? I mean, say what you want about them. We do see once the price starts going down, all the ETF holders start selling off. But JP Morgan releasing these Bitcoin structured notes, it's a leveraged play on the IBIT ETF. And so if you take a step back and you really look at the MSCI decision with right before what JP Morgan and BlackRock is building out, MSCI, the former chairman of that is, used to be the president of Morgan Stanley. So that's very interesting in itself. But they're looking at these Bitcoin treasury companies and trying to shut them down, folks. They're trying to stop the generational run that Bitcoin is on. And I would argue that we haven't really even seen a Bitcoin bull run since 2017 now. Now, before you guys come at me in the comments about all of this, let me line it out here. In 2017, we had all just basically macro, plenty of positive news. But in 2020, what did we see? We saw a black swan event. Literally, the entire world economy shut down. Everybody was sitting on their computers learning about Bitcoin. They were trading stocks. This was the gamification of the stock market. So we saw a lot of inflated assets, one, but I think Bitcoin was actually deflated in that respect, at least for its dollar value, because we had the China mining ban that set Bitcoin back. And then we had FTX and Celsius and BlockFi starting the domino effect of all these exchanges collapse. And we know that FTX was selling paper Bitcoin. So these ETFs, look, I don't trust them. I wouldn't recommend you guys buying a Bitcoin ETF. I think the truest form of actually buying Bitcoin is in self-custody. I wouldn't trust JP Morgan by buying these Bitcoin bonds. But last cycle, we trusted these custodians, and I truly believe that they were buying paper Bitcoin and like they were doing it to manipulate the markets. Granted, now these big players that have come in, they're going to want to make sure that they have the real thing, right? They're not playing any games. They're not just like, oh, we trust you, Uncle Larry. If we're throwing billions of dollars at this thing, I think that they're actually going to want to make sure that they're having the Bitcoin that they say they do. So this is where I think the Coinbases of the world worry me. But regardless, we're going to start to see Saylors try to tap into a lot of these giant 100+ trillion markets. We're looking at them doing fixed income, credit, and now the bond fixed income, and now the credit market. And so when we keep looking at how this Bitcoin space is developing, I mean, you guys got to ask yourself, how can you be bearish at a time like this when we see Bitcoin coming off exchanges at a quick pace, right? The thing that we're seeing in the current bull market, which I believe we're still in, maybe we get into that a little bit later. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. But what we see Bitcoin on exchanges, we're seeing it get to an all-time low at 2.09 million. We're seeing buying pressure from institutions following whales selling at an all-time rate. Yet we also see wallets with 10 million Satoshis or a little bit more selling off. The wallets with a lot of Satoshis, well, they're buying. The wallets with like 1,000+ Bitcoin, they're buying. But the small fish, as generally speaking, these guys are selling off during this dip. And I know you guys in the chat, maybe you guys aren't all, driving the Lambos or the yachts, as I lined out in one of my previous videos. But when you see the price dip, this is where you need to know the conviction level that you have. And this is why, say what you want about Saylor. I do love how he just continues to double and triple down on his beliefs with the way that it is going, right? I mean, if you keep watching all of this, it's going to keep shooting up and more banks are going to get involved. I mean, Saylor and his team bought literally 10,000 more Bitcoin here today, bringing it well past 650,000 to 660,000+. And we're seeing the United States look into the potential of these short-term debt aspects as well, which I think is interesting. But, this MSCI ruling, let's get back to that, right? Because Metaplanet, they're the ones that kind of shocked the world, right? The MSCI was like, we see Metaplanet raising all this capital. We really don't think that they should be able to be in all these indices, right? But the benefit of strategy and all of these guys really starting to see, some increase in flows would be joining the S&P 500. It's like, hey, I mean, we're all here in America for the most part. You guys see what's going on in college football, right? Notre Dame got screwed because they didn't get into the college football playoff. Maybe some of you guys have no idea what I'm talking about. But a big reason they didn't is because they weren't in a conference. This is like not being in an indice. This is like not being in the S&P 500. If you're in the S&P 500, it's like being in the SEC in college football. You're in the best conference. You got all the passive flows going, the TV deals, the money is rolling in, and you could use all that to buy more Bitcoin. And that's truly what we're seeing with I guess the stoppage of not allowing strategy and these Bitcoin treasury companies into the S&P 500. So I think that this is going to continue to play out, but like I said, the best form to hold your Bitcoin is in self-custody. You guys should go to the affiliate links down below. Get yourself a Trezor Safe 7. I've got mine. I'm trusting Trezor to hold my Bitcoin. It is so easy. I travel so much. You guys see me all over the place. I'm all over the world. I went to 10 different countries this year. So thank you guys all for watching, because you guys in the crowd watching right now, all 150 of you who guys aren't commenting in the chat, blow it up for me. All of you guys have made that possible, so I'm truly blessed. But a big reason or a big way that I've been able to keep track of my Bitcoin is through using a Trezor Safe 7, because it's got Bluetooth compatibility. And so it makes it easy to keep my Bitcoin in a hardware wallet, access that, keep it in cold storage so I don't have to worry about it. But I can't stop there, right? So not only should you go to the affiliate links down below to buy a Trezor, you need to head over to cryptosteel.com/greencandle. You guys could buy anything that you want here using promo code greencandle with 10% off. But the biggest thing outside of buying it, anonymously, the number one thing that I think about all of this is that all these other metal backups, they are simply punch plates. So if somebody gets into your safe, they could look at your punch plate and say, hey, you know what? Oh, would you look at this? This is a Bitcoin seed phrase. And then put it back in your safe. You would have no idea. But if you have a CryptoSteel case here, what you can do is you could put a tamper seal on it, so you can know if anybody ever accessed your seed phrase. You could do all that and literally get 10% off your entire order by simply using promo code greencandle. Now I'm going to keep diving in to what we're seeing with all of these treasury companies come on. I mean, look at this thing. 1.5 million Bitcoin in these ETFs. What are we guys doing here? But well over the nearly 1.1 million Bitcoin on publicly traded companies. I mean, we might actually see that happen. We might actually see the 1.1 million cross before the end of the year. I wouldn't be surprised. Smurf is saying that I need to shave because I've been up all night while getting my 40 hours per week of That is true. If you're not getting your 40 hours a week of podcast, I don't know what you guys are doing out here. You got to be studying all that. Shout out to the guys at the Bitcoin Bugle. They do amazing stuff. They're hilarious if you guys haven't heard any of their stuff. They make fun of everybody, so they're great. They're good for people, trying to get into the culture side of all of Bitcoin. But either way, outside of me needing to shave so the mustache looks a little bit more prominent, I think we're starting to see people really start to look and wake up. I mean, at the end of the day, folks, we got the Fed chair candidate, Kevin Hassett, and he's potentially going to become the next Federal Reserve chairman. He's formerly of Coinbase, very pro Bitcoin. And of course, he's going to want those low interest rates. So we're going to see some money start to flow into Bitcoin. We're going to see it pretty soon. So make sure you guys are smoking that like Cheech and Chong, hitting the subscribe button for me. Thank you guys all for coming out. And be sure to be subscribed, because I've got some great videos here coming this very week. I've been working hard on them for you guys. So be sure to be tuned in, and I'll catch you guys all at the next one.